How's everybody this fine week?
We're doing terrific.
Well, that's a good thing.
This is the Massachusetts chapter, right?
This is the Western Mass, but we've got just about everybody involved. We've got Paul Revere with us. We'll have maybe Granite State. We'll have the Pine Tree up in Maine. We got Rhode Island. We've got Connecticut. And we even got New Jersey. I see Greg is online. We got the Skyland chapter of New Jersey.
All right, so I'm just gonna say IAEI live program. We're talking fuses, right?
We're talking fuses.
Nice.
Okay, we're gonna check it out on Facebook. It's gonna be on my Facebook site right now and on YouTube.
Oh,
we are live on YouTube right now. We are now going live on Facebook. So check it out.
Check it out. That's right.
And so what I got to do here is what I got to do. Guest. And it'll be you and me, kid.
Yeah, you got it.
So although your picture just says NEMA Northeast Field Rep, I mean, where are you at?
I'm home, man. I only did that because I covered my camera.
Ah, there you go. Now, well, you know what? I sort of liked it the other way.
That's why I put it over there.
I love it.
Oh, boy. You got another haircut, huh?
I got a couple of them. I got a couple of them cut.
He got them all cut, I think. It looks like.
She left one long one over here.
Oh.
So you have the PowerPoint. I don't have a PowerPoint, right, Jack?
I sent you the... I don't think I sent you the one that I inserted a couple slides.
Yeah, it's no big deal.
It is. It's the FU1 PowerPoint.
Okay. You get
a haircut, or is your head getting bigger?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Awesome.
I paid that hook, Jack.
Yeah, well,
Sorry.
there's not much in there. It's just getting bigger.
Couldn't resist.
This is good stuff. All right. I don't know how to check the audio and whatnot on. I gotta check my Facebook page just to see if audio is coming good.
Sounds good from my house.
There you go. Hey, good morning or good evening, Greg. Greg Chantal from New Jersey. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
We're doing terrific.
Excellent. How did you wind up getting a haircut? I can't seem to get one.
I had to bribe my wife. It cost me a couple $100, but
Yeah, well, my wife did my hair, and she says, "You're not getting that from me again."
I got about half a dozen. I don't think I'm ever going back to the barber. I don't care anymore.
I got one of the first legal ones in Massachusetts on Memorial Day, early in the morning.
Come on.
Well, same guy's been cutting my hair for 40 years, so I was at the top of the list.
Pays to know people in the right place.
That's right.
I don't know. I got the wife now. She cooks and cuts hair. I'm all set.
Hooks and cuts.
Well, yeah, but she uses the Flowbee on your hair.
No, we don't have it. We just got that number 1 and 2.
And a salad bowl.
That's it. Go right around. Zip, zip. See you later.
There you go. That's all it takes.
I don't know. It looks as good as Jack's.
I know. Hey, I do my own. I bought a clippers and I just go up the sides, go up the back, vacuum it up, and move on. It works.
If anyone finds a Flowbee, we'll get one of those.
One of the guys in my office actually really does use the Flowbee.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I didn't think these things even existed. I mean, he's too young to buy it back in the 70s, so God only knows where he found it.
Wow.
But they're obviously still making them.
He's
Oh,
probably
I
got a
didn't see
Mr.
it
Microphone
around.
too. Love it.
You'll have to let us know where he's getting the Flowbee. We'll probably all buy one.
Maybe it's getting it used on eBay. Who knows?
Possible.
What a crew.
The
What a
best
crew
of
this
Wednesday
is.
night.
All right, we're getting a lot of good people coming in. How many people usually get here, Jack?
We got anywhere from 35 to 55. We've had up to 90 on one of them.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, you've got 2 people on YouTube watching, and I don't know how many Facebook. We got Dave Englehart on Facebook, Susan Newman Scarcey on Facebook.
Hey, Susan.
Yep. So that should be nice. I don't know how many more people we'll get. We didn't do any I didn't do any advertising, so see what happens.
You got your own following.
Yeah, you never know. I think it's all good. We've been getting a lot of good people on YouTube, so it's been great.
I would have never thought to do it that way.
Yeah, me neither. You know, and I was stuck in the house, and I'm thinking, I'm usually traveling doing these programs, and I think I went to YouTube and I said, how do I go live? And followed a couple of those tubers, and they showed how to do it, and it was easy.
Huh.
We're gonna
So I got myself a Zoom account, and I figured that's the way to do it. But I guess we could have done it on YouTube also.
Yeah, the only thing difference is we wouldn't be able to have this dialogue in person, talking like this. And
Oh, that's true.
but I'll tell you what I've learned is when you do Zoom and these other programs, it can get you play whack-a-mole trying to mute people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've run a couple meetings, and I just finished up a class last week with this, and it actually worked out pretty good. People, I gave them the ability to mute and unmute themselves, and I told them to unmute when you have a question and mute it back up, and if they forgot, I was able to do that, so it worked out okay. But
Yep.
yeah, and honestly, for my state, I need the reporting of when they logged in and logged out.
Right.
So I don't think I would be able to do YouTube.
Yeah, well, and I do the log in, log out using Mentimeter, a different tool. But
Okay.
it adds another level of complexity. So there's some benefits behind every one of these different programs.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how many people we get watching, and I've never done it like this, so I got to figure out how we're going to show the slides and all that good stuff. And well, I can just if it shows up on that screen, I'm sharing out my monitor, so it won't be too hard. It'll be good.
I'm going to, I'll share my screen, and you can actually control my screen. I'm going to give you the control. So you can flip through the slides from your own computer.
Oh, wow. Well, why don't you? We're going to do this together, right? Right, Jack?
Yeah. But
So why don't you just control
either
it?
way.
You go ahead and control it because it'll probably suck up bandwidth and all that good stuff.
What
Works for me.
No
Do-
volume.
do like old school with the slides where you just beep and then the slide
Ricky,
automatically
no volume.
moves.
There we go.
Okay.
There you go. You're in.
Hello, all.
Hey, Ricky.
Oh,
Well, volume.
Howdy. Val's,
Hi,
ban-
everybody.
Val's
This is Vince.
bandwidth is really slow again.
Come on, Val. Come on, let's get it going.
I've been in the dark ages. I just got Comcast last week. I don't know where I've been.
Excellent.
Ricky, my bandwidth may be slow, but my beer width is not.
Very nice. Are you
There's
still in
Val.
Costa Rica?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Borders
Sounds like a
aren't
sore subject, huh?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
borders aren't open.
Give your husband the keys.
He'll find a way.
Yeah. Let me tell you, he's trying.
What's up, Ricky?
Marcus, how you doing?
Yeah, surviving, keep going.
That's good. Just keep your chin up.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Hey,
I
it's Ringo. How are
Jack,
you, Ringo?
boy, how are you there? Look at that background.
right.
You're big time there.
That's right. That's right.
What's
The
that?
Nemo Studios.
You got a drive-in theater going
Yes.
by? Unofficially, my daughter heard through the Facebook or something, there was a big shakeup in the Phantom Gourmet team there. Him and his brother, and it's on the World Wide Web now.
Yeah, the brother Dave made some very inappropriate food analogies to Black Lives Matter about potatoes or something like that. So he was forced to resign from Phantom Gourmet, and also had to resign from the Mendon Twin Drive-In or whatever place they own.
Yeah, I thought the family must have bought that because he went right on the screen and said, "Gee, let us open." And somebody said you can't even get in it now. It's so busy.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, Rick, your video's coming through great, Rick.
Oh, it should. I asked for, I got to find a way to check it. I asked when we ordered it, it goes from 500 to 750 and then to 1,000. And, the increments of payment goes up, but my daughter she works at the bank and she's going to be home till September, they said. So I said, you better get the 1,000. And I'm just riding piggyback.
Yeah, you're doing
Well,
great.
we don't want you to look too good.
Yeah. I just went to CVS and got some chin remover. It didn't work though. I asked the barber for an appointment. They don't sit you in the chairs, nothing. I said, "Can you squeeze me in?" So he takes me in the back and he says, "Who cut your hair?" I said, "My wife." I sounded like Rodney Dangerfield. I said, "Fix up all the blotches, and by next month it'll all go back."
Hey, JP, how you doing tonight?
I am well.
That's a good thing.
Everything is good across the board. There wasn't a cloud in the sky today.
Hey, Jack, is that your new backdrop to get ready for Tom's presentation tomorrow?
No. You'll. I've got my old swimming pool that I'm going to use tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
You got big shoes to fill, man.
Yep.
Tim was on fire today.
Were you watching, Val?
All right.
Yeah, I was on I've been at it all week.
Cool. Well, we're live right now. We're out there on Facebook and YouTube right now. So we're getting out there. We're reaching out.
Jeffrey, it's good to hear you. It's good to hear your voice, Jeff. How you been?
Good.
Well, this is where I'm going to be tomorrow. I'm going to be in my swimming pool.
Oh, look at that. Is that 42 inches?
Yeah,
Yeah, is that a permanent structure?
I know. I store that in my living room in the wintertime.
Nice.
My daughter, when she bought a house, the pool filter was a little kind of beat up. So I went on Craigslist and found this guy. Come and get it for free. And out of a pool filters and parts and motors. I said, beautiful, because the thing was seized up. And I got the motor to run. I was proud as a peacock. I put the shutoffs on it and got it all going. And then the guy last week shows me, he indicates for permanently installed pools, affordable pools. I says, I'm screwed. I says, I bet you this thing was for a puddle. But I did learn something. It was very interesting. That was a good presentation. Hello, Arthur. How are you, buddy?
All right, what's John Powers drinking there?
Heavily.
Lemonade.
Looks like a silver bullet.
There's Georgie.
Hey, George, wherever you went. He was in, he disappeared.
George is going to get a drink.
Excellent.
Oh, what happened?
I'm in. I'm in.
Was that Charlie? Did I hear Charlie?
There's Georgie.
I'm in.
Back.
How are you, George?
Good. What's going on, guys?
Howdy.
George, what's for dinner?
I don't know yet.
I don't know.
I'm looking over there. I don't know what it is.
We're coming right over.
I just got home. I said, I got to hurry up. I got to log on.
Wow, there's another friend of mine.
Who?
Nielsen.
All right,
How are you?
Hello, everybody.
all right. Good for you. Welcome aboard.
Nielsen, you take that picture or,
No, I didn't took the picture. It was clear my phone, but when I upload to the website, the picture didn't come out so well. The panel comes with a bus bar inside the panel. Tap it. Have you see? Is it? The panel was in Somerville.
listen, don't tell me that.
15.
I don't want to
15
know that.
Oh, 15. I'm gonna have to pull a permit, so you're gonna
Oh,
have to go
shit,
there.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah.
So Jack, I sent you a copy of that picture, Jack.
Oh, no, I'm gonna show everybody the copy you sent me.
Well,
I-
that's
I-
what I thought.
Here,
I can't
I'm
help.
gonna do it. I'm gonna do it right now, John. I wanna let you know that,
I don't know if
looking
I-
at some,
Uh-oh,
looking
here we go.
at this, I'm wondering, what the hell did you send it to me for?
Thanks.
No, I have over here. I don't know if I can send the picture on this website, but the panel when you take the cover off,
hold the panel up.
the bar, the cables feed through the panel, and you just have a jumper from the 250 cm case of milk to 100 main breaker. Let me see if I can send it to the picture where I took the panel.
See if it's any better.
Yeah.
Was
Sorry, I'm
that
gonna
their-
try.
Was that their complete name, their title back in the day? ITE Imperial?
I went online. I couldn't see no
Yes.
picture of that panel, and I saw one time, long time ago, Federal Pacifico is the I assume the raceway come from the basement, and they take everything on the same line and go up and just feed through
So
the panel.
where is it? Where is it? What building is it in?
House Somerville House.
Oh, did you get
15
involved? Did you get
15
involved in
Western?
that one?
15 Western.
Western.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So they'll run up and then tap off. They have like a tap box on the panel. They run
Yes.
out and tap. So there's no main
All right.
break. So it's like a 250 amps or something like that going up the line. Feed all those apartments.
Yeah, I'm
All
gonna.
right,
Stand
so
in for that.
here's what I'm gonna do for you, John. First of all, I'm gonna ask everybody to start muting your microphone. We're gonna shut off some cameras and we'll talk in a little bit. Make sure you put your name in the chat box,
10 minutes.
so I know you're here.
Okay,
And
no, just 10 minutes, we'll call you back.
then, let's see, make sure you put questions in
Okay,
the
bye.
chat box.
Bye.
So, George, say hi
Yes.
to your guests, tell them we'll be over for dinner, and I'm going to mute your phone.
Okay, go ahead.
All right.
Am I muted?
Very good. All right. So, we better get going. We've got some slides to go through. I also, to John's question, tonight's question is he sends me this photograph and he says, what breaker can go into an ITE Imperial Corporation panel board? So it just so happens that I've got two manufacturers on the line, and maybe they can, oh, I got some bad network quality. Let's hope that changes. Okay, so I've got a camera. Jeff Goldsmith, if you can turn your camera off, that would be good. Let's see if I can get that set up.
Jack, there's a better
Okay.
picture. He sent a better picture in the.
All right. You got a better picture. You're going to send that to me?
It's in the chat box.
Oh, I'll be darned. Let me see. Oh, look at that.
Look at that.
Let me see if I can drag that picture up to the other screen because can you see that? You can't see the one he took.
What's the question, Jack?
Is there a breaker that's classified to go in ITE panel, arc fault breaker, an arc fault circuit interrupter breaker.
No.
That would be classified to go into this old panel.
No, sir. No, you would have to put a little something next to that panel. You're not. You could always replace the entire interior. There's ways to. There are products that you can purchase where you could take those guts out, and they're UL listed retrofit interiors, and you can put it inside that, and then you could put the brand newest breakers that you ever saw in that thing. But you can't. There's no classified products that'll go into an ITE panel board.
Okay. And why is that?
Why don't you just put a arc fault outlet in at the beginning of the source?
Yeah, you could do that too, Val. That's right. You could put a receptacle right outside there and feed that through. And the reason, Jack, is because there's no real, when the classified program, you're testing with other manufacturers' panel boards, and that's basically, product that's on the shelves that they have. And we don't, we're not going to go back and do a classified program with a product where the I'm not sure who owns ITE these days, but I doubt they're making those panels. Are they? I'm not.
Siemens owns ITE.
Oh, well, do we have Vince Dalacroce on the phone?
I am here.
So, Vince, do you still make those panels?
No, and we're not going to be able to support with the IT breaker, like you said, Tom, in a classified version. So I agree. Probably the best option would be to retrofit the interior if possible. If not, I don't know any other way. I mean, yeah, the receptacle is an option if you can meet the requirements in 212, short of swapping out that panel.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question, John. Because if there's another answer out there, I wouldn't believe it. Hearing from these two guys.
No, it was a good format to get the question out there, so I'm good with that. I did see the IT Siemens and ITE, but I wasn't sure, and obviously I couldn't tell by that picture that was sent to me. So now that it's a little clearer, so well.
Very good.
Adelson, I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'll give you a call. I'm actually heading into the city tomorrow. So.
Okay.
Okay. Very good. All right. Thank you, people. So let's move on. We're very close. I only have one. I don't have any announcements to make, and I'm going to put Greg. I don't know if George is on, but Greg, have you heard any more about the eastern section?
No news at this point. I'm gonna guess that based on what we were telling you last week, we're probably not going to be having the section meeting this year. We will have to have our annual meeting, which is required by the bylaws, but we will not be able to hold our section meeting, which will be postponed, not canceled, but postponed till next year. That isn't official, but that is where we're heavily leaning toward.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. So on that note, wait and see. We are going to move forward. There's Christina. How are you, Chris? We're gonna ask you to turn your camera off so we can save some bandwidth and go from there. We're ready to start this show. And tonight, who I've got with me tonight is Tom Dmitrievich. And Tom is the VP of Technical Sales for Eaton Corporation. And he probably has a number of other different titles and accolades, but that is the most important one. He's a very busy man, and I was able to rope him into doing this presentation with me tonight. And this presentation is an overview of fuses and application for fuses. And our fuse section has put together this presentation along with a couple extra slides that are in there about fuses and some of the applications and some of the characteristics of fuses. So, Tom, I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit more, but let's get rolling.
Yeah, well, Jack, I think you did a good job, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm honored to have been reached out to, and I appreciate the opportunity. I'm looking forward to talking fuses, try to answer any questions, and I say we just get this ball rolling, Jack.
I like it. I like it. Again, people, make sure your questions go in the chat box. We will go through those as we go through the night. We're going to probably get to those at the end, but put them in there.
Jack, record it.
You know, I am going to record this.
Yep. And note too, Jack, that I'm putting this is being live streamed on Facebook and on YouTube. I'll send you the YouTube link if you guys want to use it, you can. So I'll chop off the beginning part, obviously. But
perfect.
Yeah, I can do that.
All right. Well, let's move forward. Let's get the one thing I do want to make sure everybody puts their name in the chat box. So I have that chat box will live on forever. My attendance list goes away at the end of this meeting, but the chat box stays there. So if you can all record your name in the chat box that you were logged in. I'm still working with the state. Don't know whether or not haven't got a confirmation whether or not we're going to be able to provide these 1 hour sessions towards our license renewals in Massachusetts. But get your name in there. I'm keeping records, and we will beat up the state as we move forward. So let's move forward now. So on this here, the application training manual, you know, we're going to start off with, you know, where we are with codes and standards. You know, we have, of course, the National Electrical Code, Installation Code, but there's a whole number of different standards we use for all of our products. Standards that are used by testing laboratories to test products to. So we have, you know, we have a little sign there. Of course, this Grove, the Coconut Grove fire site. You know, this is really how can we stop electrical fires? How can we stop these deaths, these tragedies occurring all over the country? So we have all of these codes. We have rules that in those codes that we abide by when we do their installations. We've got product standards. We've got all these guidelines that we follow, but we also have to make sure we adopt the codes. You know, in our regulations, we have in our CMRs, you know, we've got the Massachusetts Electrical Code. So we regulate that, we adopt it, and our compliance is we have an inspection process. So we cover all of those in Massachusetts. What I do is I make sure I go around the country, you know, or my area, and make sure all the states do the same thing. It's imperative that we know what the standards are, know what the codes are, and know what our responsibilities are as participants in this industry.
Beautiful.
So what are the people involved here? We've got UL. All right, they do all the testings. We've got CSA. They do testing up there for Canada for those electrical products. We have an ANSI process. ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, they develop a process in developing codes and standards. The NEC is developed under an ANSI process. It's a fair and balanced process. Goes through all of the, you know, the conditions that NFPA sets out. We have public inputs that are coming due. So keep your eye on the calendar for public inputs for the next 2023 code. And so they set the ground rules. And, you know, so it's a fair and balanced process to develop a standard or a code. And And then we also have the IEEE, and the IEEE has different standards and codes. You know, one of the ones we hear about a lot is the National Electrical Safety Code, the utility standard for installations. So they set their own, they set up a standard and a guideline for utilities for high voltage applications. So the IEC, we'll talk a little bit about IEC tonight, but that is the International Electrical Technical Commission. And we see a lot of IEC products out in the field now. They have some standards. They have maybe some harmonized standards between IEC and the American standards, you know, whether it's UL, whether it's NEMA or whatever. Mm-hmm. They have some standardized or harmonized standards. So it's accepted and installed in the United States. So of course, NEMA is a standards organization. We follow the ANSI process. You know, we just went through an ANSI audit in all of our standard development. So we invite people. Not only do we have members involved, but we invite people in when we develop standards outside of the association to keep that process fair and balanced.
Yep. And then, you know, Jack, a part of that ANSI process is that you want the balanced members. You have to get a public review a few times. So, you know, the things that we do as part of the NFPA process, which is under that ANSI envelope, which you had already indicated, we do that in a lot of the other standards like UL and others that will follow that same process, and it has to be fair and balanced, and why we have limitations on how many different categories of people that can sit on different committees.
Very good. And then the last one we have the ETL, TUV, we think of these other organizations as NERDLs, they're testing laboratories, but they're also SDO, which is a standards development organization also. So they can do both. They will do both. So.
Amen.
Now, one of the things that we hear about a lot is this the NERDLs. You know, what is the National Recognized Testing Laboratory? And they're testing laboratories, but now the OSHA program on the NERDLs has developed a well, I don't know if you'd call it an approval process for these testing laboratories to be acceptable to the AHJs when they're approving products and to approve listed products under certain guidelines. So we have a NERDL that is recognized by OSHA. They have the ability to test to certain product standards for certain products. So if you go to the OSHA site and you go to the NERDL program, you'll find that there may be some NERDLs that are limited to what they can test to. They may only test, I'll give an example. They may only test light fixtures, luminaires, but that is under the auspices of OSHA. That's what they're granted. So not all NERDLs can test all products. So there is a list of some of the things that they can test to. So, and there is the site that if you want to look at that, it lists what is recognized by OSHA. If it's not on the list, it shouldn't be approved under the the definition of approval in the NEC.
Absolutely.
Hey, Jack, this is Jeff Fecto. Can I make a comment on that?
Absolutely. I don't know who's the Jeff Fecto. Who? I've never heard of that guy. Where's he from, Tom?
So
Jeff Fecto, good to have you from UL.
Thanks, Jack. So just real quick, I agree with everything you said. The only thing I want to put out there is OSHA is not a fast-paced moving organization. So newer standards like, for example, 9540 for energy storage systems OSHA hasn't accredited anybody to do that. Now, when UL publishes that standard, of course, we submit it to OSHA, but it can take upwards of 3 years before OSHA will evaluate and accredit that standard. So just as an FYI, if you look on that list, whether it's UL or anybody else, and it's not there, check and see if any other NRTLs have been accredited to that standard. And if nobody has, you may ask that NRTL to show you that they've at least submitted to OSHA for accreditation.
Good point. Good point. Thank you, Jeff. Good information. All right.
That's why we got him.
So, yeah, you bet. All right. So tonight, what we're going to do is we have codes to Underwriters Laboratory. We have some standards under UL. They created the standard for the product. All right. Outside of the testing organization, there's two different entities. You know, one makes the standard and one does the testing. So they've developed the standard for both low voltage fuses and fuse hosers, things that we're going to cover tonight. We're going to try to go over the overview of the standard, but we're going to talk about 248, 4248, and the approvals and the markings of these products that are required by the standard. And so I don't know definitions. We'll talk some definitions,
yeah.
But the difference between UL and NEC, and seeing that we don't have Jeff Sargent on the line today, we can say UL rocks. You know?
There you go. I like it.
All right. And of course, the listing marking itself. And we've got some UL approvals and the markings. This is what we're looking for. We've got listed fuses. They comply with all the requirements inside that standard. General use, applies to the NEC, and bears the listing marking. So these are the markings you want to look for on that product. Now, the bottom one is a UL recognition. You'll see there's no UL standard per se exists. Does not meet all the requirements in the standard, but it might be suitable for limited applications. So you may have I dare say, a HVAC piece of equipment that you may have a recognized overcurrent device. It may be supplemental only, but it is now going to be only UL recognition and not UL listed.
Absolutely.
Now here is some other markings you want to look for, and here is a dual listing. So we have a Canadian and a UL standard, or list marking, I should say. So the top marking is both listed for Canada and US. The CSA marking on the bottom, another testing laboratory in Canada. And so they're going to do testing for products in Canada. And I guess my question was, you know, how do we accept anything in United States with a CSA marking if it's only for Canada? Or can we? You know, how can we do that?
You know, I'd say, Jack, a lot of these solutions are listed both ways. I know when we make products, we will list them to UL, but then we'll also do the CUL, you know, the CSA approval. So we get them listed for both locations, both countries, both types of organizations, and a lot of the standards have, you know, they're harmonized and they're overlap with each other, and you know, outside of some differences like in panel boards where they require certain barriers and things of that nature. But when you get down to like overcurrent devices like fuses and circuit breakers, I think a lot of those are going to be listed both ways.
Okay. All right.
But you know, it's a good question about with regard to if you have something that's just CSA, is that compatible with the installation requirements that are in the National Electrical Code? Because remember, in the 2020 code or in the 2017, I can't remember which. I think it was it the 17 where we introduced some language up front where we talked about products that were designed and listed to standards that are compatible with the installation requirements of the National Electrical Code? I think it's in 9.
I don't call that. But Jeff Fecto just put in that there's a CSA US marking. So you may see a US on that marking. 110.3C.
Yeah, I think that's the section. Okay, 110.3C. Yeah, I know there was a discussion on one of these code cycles where we said, so listing the product testing evaluation of the listed product shall be in accordance with applicable product standards recognized as achieving equivalent and effective safety for equipment installed to comply with this code. And then we referenced the OSHA, NERDL program and things like that. Yeah. So.
But if it's harmonized, you could pretty much find out if it was if it was listed at CSA under the standard, it was a harmonized standard between Canada and US, it would be acceptable to an AHJ.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. And then the last one we have to look out for, this is the CE marking. And this CE marking, this really comes from an IEC or it is sort of a self-certifying mark.
That's right.
For product. So we see that a lot in the European market, but when it's over here and you see a CE mark, do your homework. And that is not an accepting marking for you.
That's exactly right. And that was one of the
stands for can't energize.
Yeah, that's one of those. That was an effort in I don't know if it was the 17 or the 14. I'd have to really check my code books there. But in chapter 1, we put some information in there that says the products that you're installing need to be compatible or designed and listed to be compatible and developed in combination with the National Electrical Code. Because a lot of these European type standard products, they'll have different bending radiuses. They won't have enough room to give you the bending radius in your conductors and whatnot. When you start getting into those assemblies, you'll recognize that some of that equipment is much smaller. You take an IEC rated starter and compare that to a NEMA rated starter. There's a big size difference in between those two for the exact same type of motor load. So those products are designed not with an eye on our installation requirements. So you got to be very careful when you have something that's CE marked and doesn't have a UL or some other type of equivalent listing recognition.
Right. All right. Good. So here are the two standards that we're going to look at tonight. The standard for low voltage fuses and the 248 for low voltage fuses. Some of the characteristics we're going to look for. Electrical, mechanical, the criteria, acceptance level for that, acceptance criteria for overload, short circuit levels, and the marking requirements. And then we're going to have the 3 requirements under the fuse holder, still the mechanical characteristics. What is the acceptance criteria and what do they have to be marked to in that standard?
Right. Now, you got to remember, too, when you're dealing with fuses, remember that you have 3 different manufacturers or multiple manufacturers that will be placing their fuse into the same fuse holder. So what you get from a dynamics with these types of devices, like you don't have the same issue on the circuit breaker side of the family, because in some cases, I know we have the listing requirements that say you can't put, like, say, a square D breaker into an Eaton panel or a Siemens or an Eaton breaker into a Siemens panel unless it is classified for that. In the fuse industry, they pay a very close attention to rejection features and things of that nature, but realizing that you have a fuse holder listed to UL 4248. the dimensions of that fuse holder align up with the construction of the fuse itself as per UL 248. So there's a little bit more dynamic, I think, in the fuse industry that I recognize coming from the breaker world and moving into the fuse world. As I moved into the busman role a while ago, I see that as a difference.
Right. Now, both of these standards are tri-national harmonized standards.
Yep.
So they're good. They're harmonized with the American, Canadian, and the Mexican market, the ANSI market. I don't know if that is just strictly Latin. Is that Latin America or just Mexico?
I believe it's
ANSI.
I believe in Mexico.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So these are your classifications in the UL 248. You have general requirements, and then you will list all of these fuses.
Yeah, so each one of these, so you got to remember, you have the Class CC fuse, the Class Gs, the Hs, the Js, the Ks. All of those will have a different footprint. They will have a different, they'll have a different footprint. They'll have different, when I say footprint, I mean by dimensions. They'll have different characteristics like let through, current limitation capabilities, and things of that nature. So each individual fuse class is broken out into a different, you have UL 248-1 is your general requirements. It's just like the National Electrical Code. You have the general requirements, and then you have the specific requirements for each of those classes of fuse. And the big differentiator outside of the current limiting performance of those devices is the footprint, the size, and all of the rejection features that might be included in each of those classifications.
And on another note, here's your fuse holders, following the same guidelines as the fuses itself.
Right. So, those, if you think about it from the circuit breaker is all enclosed. So it includes everything outside of the panel board that you're putting it into. So it has the switch inside, it has the overcurrent protection capabilities, but a fuse is separate from its holder. So we've got to have standards to help the marriage between the fuse itself and its holder to achieve its function in whatever circuit and whatever piece of equipment that you're going to be putting that into. So you'll notice that you have the classifications line up with the fuses themselves, but you won't see, for example, you'll have in the previous slide you had a standard 248 for Class L fuses, but you don't see a holder for a Class L fuse. And the reason is because normally those big boys are just bolted into the bus, right? They're included into the enclosure themselves and bolted onto the bus. So there is no holder or fuse holder for some of those fuses. That's why the list in the 4248 is going to be a little less than the list in the 248 standards.
Great. Okay, so we'll skip over this. This is where we are. We're adopting Massachusetts again. The first in the country to move to the 2020. This is an old map citing some of the 17 adoption, but we are seeing a lot of delays because of the COVID-19. We're seeing a lot of delays in adoption, so our neighboring states may be pushed out until probably the first of 2021 before they start adopting around us. So, but this is something I monitor, something that I closely watch and get involved with for each state in my territory, as do all the other field reps throughout the country. We have, I think you all pretty much know Brian Holland, Tim McClintock, and Mike Stone. We all do the same thing. We follow the code adoption, and just see if we can get them back up to speed in the next cycle. And we'll just keep an eye on where they are for the 2020 adoption. We'll keep you informed. All right, so I'm going to skip this one, and I'm going to go right into basic applications. And the first one we're going to look at is motors. And because motors, motors have a unique starting characteristics. We have general rules in Article 430 in fuse sizing. So we have to look, and they pretty much call out the different characteristics of fuses and circuit breakers. So we're going to talk a little bit about what type 1 and type 2 protection is for motors and motor controls. And then we're going to talk a little bit about transformers and the characteristics of inrush current on transformers, calculating full load amps, and then sizing, fuse sizing based on some of the rules, whether it's primary, secondary, and we've got some examples. So the slide I have coming up here is blank until I hit the button. So this is your starting characteristics of the motor. So you've got high lock rotor current when you first start it up. We have a time duration, and then we have a steady state full load current, full load amperes in that time frame. So from there on out, after we started up. So we have built into this curve here. This is our current curve for that motor. So we've got to look at what value is this lock rotor current up here compared to our full load ampere level down here. And typically you might see 6 times the full load current.
Yeah,
So,
and in reality too, Jack, that first half cycle is not symmetrical. It's typically asymmetrical because of the inductance to resistance characteristics of the load and the system. So that first half cycle is a doozy, and normally we don't really plot that or talk about it much, but the code and the multipliers and whatnot that the code has for that initial inrush current for considering it is typically enough, but you could come across areas where where you, even if you design it and if you're cutting it kind of close from a lower amp rating, you could still trip that circuit breaker or open that fuse.
Right. Okay. All right. So here we've got some different types of fuses for motor applications. Class L, J, CC, RK, RK1, and Class CF. So we've got some of these will address some of this high inrush current during startup. Now we have a note here. Actually, this is a question. You're all going to have to write a question down. And we're going to go through some of these things, and you're going to have to come up with an answer at the end if you want your CEUs. What is the only UL fuse class to have ampere ratings up to 6,000 amperes? What is the maximum defined ampere rating of a Class CC fuse? What is the difference between a Class R fuse and a Class K fuse? And what fuse line is renewable?
Wow.
So if you get all of those questions right, you win a lollipop. So keep that in mind. Those are the ones we want to look for tonight.
There you go.
All right.
Boy, you run a tight ship, Jack.
Hey, these guys are tough. All right. Next slide. So in this case here, we have motor overcurrent short circuit. We have short circuit protection, and we have overload protection. So we're going to try to come up with an example. Can I use a fuse to do both of them? Can I use a fuse that meets the allowance set up in the code in 430 for overload protection, and then have that also meet our short circuit protection? And I say short circuit, and we all know that it says ground fault circuit, blah, 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 blah. I just say short circuit protection. The code wants to give it this 9-word description for that code, this first fuse in line. So that short circuit. So we're going to look at this motor here, and we've got a 50 horsepower, 460 volts. We got a full load amp of 65, and we know that things are sized 125%. The conductors are sized up there, but if we start looking at overload, we are allowed to go 125% of under these conditions of service factor and temperature rise and stuff like that. We can go up to 125% under the general rules for overload protection. So we can't exceed that amount. So 65 amps times 121.25 gives us 81.25 amps. And an 80 amp class J fuse would fit the bill. It meets the overload protection, and will it meet the short circuit protection? Well, we have short circuit protection. And I also, what I did here is I kind of ad-libbed on this slide a little bit. I put an example of, let's say that 80 amp fuse didn't quite make it. We are allowed to go up to 140% for overload protection on that motor. And I did the calculation, it comes up with 91 amps. And now I go back to a 90 amp class J fuse that I provide both overload and short circuit protection for this motor circuit.
Yep.
So where's my slide? I lost my slide. No, we'll go back to it. So here is one. Now we've got just short circuit protection. We're going to provide, we got a 65 horsepower, or I'm sorry, 50 horsepower, 65 amp full load amperes. And we go 1.75 gives us 114 amps. Now we can go up to that next size up, that 125 amp class J fuse for this fuse up here for our short circuit protection. So what I want to do is I want to move to this table, and I'm going to throw everything in there. Hopefully I'll do it all in one click. There we go. Woo. There's one more. Is there one more? No, yeah, one more. Let me click it one more time. Lots of lines. That's it. So here is our motor. We've got a high inrush current. This is our current scale, our time scale. So we've got a startup time and a startup current, and then it levels out and it comes back to our full load ampere rating right here. We've got 4 separate fuses on our diagram. Now this fuse here, where we see there's an intersection in the line, that is a 100 amp non-time delay fuse, a class J fuse, non-time delay, fast acting. You'll see where they intersect right there. That means the fuse just blew. So what we look at is the next two fuses. If we have 2 fuses here and one of them is a time delay 80 amp, we get a curve that comes close to this knee, but it doesn't intersect. And of course, it's still good at the full load ampere range way up here. Well, if this is too close and we find that fuse doesn't start the motor, the code allows us to go to the 140%, and we can push that curve out to the 90 amp fuse on the red line on the right-hand side.
Yeah, you know, Jack,
time delay.
This really does a good job of showing, too, the difference between a fast-acting versus a time delay fuse. And when you look at the, you have a Class J fuse. All of these are Class J fuses, but the curves are considerably different between a fast-acting fuse and a time delay. you would not want to use a fast-acting fuse on anything that was like a rotating motor or a transformer with transformer inrush. Fast-acting fuses are used primarily in places like data centers and on loads that aren't going to draw that inrush current. So that time delay and the shape of that fuse curve is critical to help you ride through that few cycles of inrush current on such things as motors and transformers.
I would say that the big exception to that is for a variable frequency drive, where you do want to use a very fast acting fuse to protect the drive, even though it's feeding a motor.
Right, and the difference there is when you put a fast acting fuse on a variable frequency drive, it will not see the inrush current. That's the beauty of a variable frequency drive. It controls that motor during its start time. So you would put that fast acting fuse on the supply side for that variable frequency drive, and that would be a prime example of a non-rotating load, because the VFD does not give you inrush current. Although it's serving a rotating load, it takes care of ramping that motor up to speed.
Okay, very good. All right. So the next slide we're going to talk about is the two different characteristics. We called that first one the overload function and the short circuit element. So Tom, I'm going to let you explain this a little bit.
Yeah. So what you're seeing here is what's inside the tube, so to speak, and all of those pinch points that you see on the bottom portion of that element, that's what takes care of the short circuit. So what you're not seeing is that there's sand all the way around that element. And what happens is when the fault current is large enough that it flows through and blows all of those little pinch points, and it heats that sand up. And we know what happens when you heat sand up. It creates what they call fulgurite. I don't mean to be vulgar with you, but it turns that into fulgurite, which is a glass, a very good insulator. So that's your short circuit protection, but it takes a lot of current to blow those pinch points. And that's why that portion of the element is what gets you your current limitation and for the high fault currents. Now, for the low fault currents, we have the overload element, and the way that's designed is, and everybody does it a little bit differently, but the principle is the same. There's like a dab of I don't know, something that's meltable at a lower temperature. It could be maybe a little bit of lead or other materials in there, and what'll happen is the plunger that's connecting that base unit with the number 3 on it to the portion of it that has all those pinch points, that's being connected under the force of a spring that wants to pull it apart. So what happens is when that melts, that spring acts to pull that apart, but it melts at lower amperage values, but it takes, because it's melting, you're looking for a longer duration of current. So you need current and you need a lot of time to heat that up to get it to a melting point where it will disconnect. Now, what that does is helps you shape the curve in the overload region. What we will also do to further shape that curve, maybe down there where it says minimum melt, where that arrow is pointing in that region, they'll put what they call them M spots, I think they call it, where they'll put a little dab of a material on the element, on that short circuit portion of the element, which will help it shape, again, that curve. And it's a science unto itself to know exactly how to construct that piece of the pie to get the curve that you need, to meet the UL standards, because they'll tell you a couple data points that you have to hit, or not be greater than, so to speak. But everything else, you have flexibility. So manufacturers will try to create a trip curve. And that's how when I think about a fuse curve, I'm really, when you tell me a class L, you tell me a time delay or fast acting, class J, or class H, in my mind, I'm picturing these fuse curves because every one of those different classifications, every one of those different types of fuses, even within a specific class, is basically giving you a shape of a curve that you need to understand for the reasons of what Jack pointed out with motors and like the inrush current. You got to think about that. But then you also have to think about coordinating with something upstream and downstream. And you want similar slopes throughout the power distribution system and not go crazy, because it could be hard to coordinate upstream and downstream overcurrent protective devices to ensure that downstream opens before the upstream does. So the way we construct these elements helps dictate the shape of that curve, which is really and the current limitation capabilities, which is way over there to the right for very high fault currents. That little piece of physics that's sitting there on the left in that copper physics experiment is what gets you your current limitation and your overload and short circuit protection. Make sense?
Right on. There we go. Good. Now, this is a quick video. I don't know if I can do this. I'm going to try. Oh, boy. Hold on a second. I'm sorry about that.
We'll see how this comes through.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to get the sound, but let's try it. You may not need to see it. Maybe tell me if you can hear the sound. I'll play it. Can you hear that sound?
No.
Okay. So what I want you to do is, this is representing coordination, type 1 and type 2 coordination. We've got a fuse block that's going to be energized. We got a short on that controller. And you'll see those fuses blink. That means we've got a short circuit going through that contactor. And it's going to come up. And it's a long video, but it's going to compare what's going to happen to that fuse block. I mean, the fuse is just blue. Nothing happened to that controller. And what this definition is all about is type 1 protection coordination on these blocks means it might be damaged and you may have to replace it, but there will be no hazard to equipment or personnel in doing it. Now, in that case, certainly you had a hazard, and that was a breaker that didn't provide type 1 protection. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through type 2 protection, and these are IEC rated contactors with the overload built into them. The fuses are going to go. We're going to put a fault current through that contactor, and when the fuses go, and you just missed it. It did go, and nothing happened to that contactor. Now, that contactor, because it's type 2 coordinated, can be used again. This should not damage the piece of equipment. So there's two different types of classifications of protection, coordinated protection. And I don't know if I said it right, Tom, but help me out.
Yeah, type.
That one there shows a destruction of the breaker, but not using a breaker.
Yeah, you were breaking up there for me, but so type 2 protection is what gets you the better coverage where you have no damage left. Type 1 protection is what you're seeing here, where it still will pass the test because you're allowed to have damage, and it's just the extent of damage that they try to control. When you use a type 2 type of application, that means that you're not going to have the amount of damage that you see. Everything's got to. There are certain tests that it has to pass after you do the test, and it's not as popular to be specified that way these days. But it really does a lot for the electrical worker, because if you think about it, if there's a problem in that equipment, you can be in front of it. It may not burn you, and it may not create a big arc flash blast, but it can create an unintended rapid disassembly in the field that would not be very attractive. But a type 2 type of application, you would not have that level of damage at all.
Great. Okay. So let me go back to I pulled these slides, Tom, from your current limitation fuse presentation.
Beautiful.
And this shows a little bit of that asymmetrical sine wave you were talking about.
Yeah. So what's really important is if you remember, we talked about the asymmetrical waveform during a short circuit event. That first half cycle is a doozy, right? And the reason is because of the slope of that first half, that first line. When you go into a short circuit, the slope is very steep. It's like falling off of a really big pitched roof, slate roof in Massachusetts, as opposed to a little a small, very lightly pitched roof. It's that first step is a doozy. So what happens is that transition of current, because of that slope, translates into magnetic forces in the circuit. The duration of the fault current that flows translates into heat. So what your goal is from a current limitation perspective is to not let 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cycles. That's 6 cycles of clearing time. You don't want 6 whole cycles, because that is a lot of heat, and that first half cycle is the magnetic forces that'll rip things apart. You want to limit the heat, so you want to get it to a less than a half of a cycle, and that's about a quarter cycle. Your fuses they love current. They eat current for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The more of it, the more they love it. And the faster they'll go. So you limit the amount of time you let that current flow, but you also limit that peak current. So your equipment, that might say be 100,000 amps, but in reality, because the fuse is doing its job, it's nowhere near 100,000 amps that your electrical equipment will see. It'll only see a peak current that is much less and much less duration. And this chart tells you the performance of what those fuses are for those very high currents when they go into the current limiting region. So we've all familiar with that. Well, we may or may not be, the up over down method, right? What you have across the bottom is your RMS symmetrical short circuit current. If you go all the ways up to the B line and over, that tells you the peak of the asymmetrical current. So for 86,000 amps of RMS short circuit current, the peak is 198,000 amps. And if you have a current limiting 800 amp fuse in that picture, you reduce the peak from 198,000 amps all the ways down to 49,000 amps. So that's a significant reduction in the peak. And then from a RMS perspective, you've reduced that down to 21,000 of RMS, which is root mean square. So you've reduced the heat, you've reduced the magnetic forces on the power distribution system by operating that fuse in its current limiting region. Now, remember, fuses love current. If that fuse doesn't see enough current to be in its current limiting region, now you're in the long time region. That's when you can run into incident energy issues and things of that nature, because now you're into seconds. Once that curve crosses 0.01 seconds, any currents greater than that point, you're into the current limiting region of that fuse. Hopefully that helps.
Right. That's great. Wonderful. Okay, so let's go to transformers. So we all know what a transformer is, variety of ratings, where we use them all, but how do we protect it? So this is your transformer characteristic, current characteristic, and you see that that high inrush current when you're energizing that transformer. And then of course you balance out to a full load ampere, and you see a short time duration where you get that high inrush. And what we're going to do is look at what are the fuses that we want to look at for transformers. And these are your options: the L's, the J's, RKs, the RK1, and then you got the class CC fuse and the CF fuses. So we go to the application here. We've got a 480 volt, 208 volt transformer, step down transformer. We've got some overcurrent protection. We've got some cases where we can just protect the primary, or we can protect the primary and secondary. They both meet certain conditions. So we'll go through some examples. We got a primary current of 90 amps. We've got the total transformer VA. We've got a formula to use to come up with that. And we've got a secondary current of 208 amps. And the first one, we have 125%, primary fuse only. So in that case, we got a 90 amp on our full load current, on the full load amps on the primary, multiply it, we get that 112.5, and where'd we go? Okay, well, all right. So we got a primary fuse only. We've got a 112. I don't know where the fuse went. I don't know. We didn't select the fuse. Maybe we'll go back to that. So in this case here, we have a primary fuse, but we also have a secondary fuse. So we can increase the primary fuse to 2.5. All right, 250%. We've got a 225 amp fuse. And on the secondary, we go 125%. So we got 208 times that, and that'll give us the 260 or the next available frame size up. And we did not pick the fuse on that case there, but go to the table, you get the next available frame size up on that fuse size. So what I wanted to pick up here, Tom, and maybe you can shed some light on that. We have some coordination issues in Massachusetts. So we have a definition, our document, and if everybody goes to this NEMA page and looks under selective coordination, we actually have a white paper to show about how to get coordination with circuit breakers. And, you know, we don't want to talk about circuit breakers tonight, but go to that, because what we've done in Massachusetts is we've changed the definition of selective coordination. And what I want, Tom, if you could spend a few minutes on telling them that maybe not such a good idea. And this is really using the healthcare facility definition of coordination, not selective coordination. So this is what we're looking for. And I'll let you take it from there, Tom, because I did oppose the change of that, and it was really based on design of systems.
One of the things that, so here's the difference between what you're looking at there is your what we call the 0.1 second, which to your point was what healthcare did. And what that basically does is, when, you know, if you look at 700, 701, and 708, you have to evaluate the performance of your system with regard to current, how much current is passing through those overcurrent protective devices. For example, what you're seeing on the screen here, if I have a fault downstream of device D, I need to determine whether or not device C will trip before device D. And if I don't calculate a fault current and compare it to the trip curves, I do not know whether or not device D will trip before device C. So there are two aspects that are critical in determining selective coordination. You need to understand the characteristic curves, and you need to compare current. What the 0.1 second rule does is it basically ignores current. To achieve selective coordination to achieve coordination in a 0.1 second world, you plot both curves, hide everything below 0.1 seconds, ignore the fault current, and make sure you have a separation of curves in the overload region. So all you know when you've done a 0.1 second analysis is that on an overload, it will not trip. The upstream, you'll have coordination. What you don't know is what happens on a ground fault, which is one of the most common faults in a power distribution system. You don't know what happens on an arcing fault, which is another common problem in the system. And you don't know, obviously, what's going to happen in a three-phase bolted fault. But in a 700 and a 701 and 708 system, and also in data centers, these are the life safety and data centers. I guess if my bank shuts down, that's life safety for me, right? I can't go shopping. But in any case, in those scenarios, they're requiring you to do an evaluation of all of these devices with regard to the amount of fault current that they will see. And they've elected to pick the three-phase bolted fault current as the level of fault current that you need to coordinate to or selectively coordinate to, because you're not going to see anything higher. So you're guaranteed that any fault that system sees, whether it's an overload, or if it's a ground fault, if it's an arcing fault, or if it's a three-phase bolted fault, you know that device D is going to trip before device C. In a coordinated system in the 0.1 second world, the only thing you know is that in an overload, device D will open before device C, but you don't know anything else. So that's been the battle between the two. And the reason that is attractive is because I don't need to hire an engineer to do a coordination study at all. I mean, all I need to do is compare two curves. And in fact, we publish tables, so you don't even have to do that. So I eliminate the short circuit study because I don't need to know fault currents. I eliminate the coordination study. I eliminate that engineer out of that picture. It takes a lot of cost out of the situation, and I don't have to increase the size of my equipment upstream. So there's I think the drive is in that region, but what it really does is it puts the onus on the PE to be making a decision on how they want the performance of this system to function. And that is really, some would argue that is the job of the PE, that they need to weigh the cost with reliability, with arc flash, and maybe they do redundant, dual redundant, triple redundant systems in lieu of coordination. It's all up to the engineer. So, but that's the difference between the 0.1 seconds and the selective coordination. Now, what you're seeing here is the discussion around what has to selectively coordinate. And what the 2020 version of the code did was basically put the argument debate to bed on whether or not devices A and B have to selectively coordinate with each other. Because the issue is that, and you've probably gone through these debates, do I have to selectively coordinate A and B? They're not in the life safety system. They're not a part of the 700, 701, and 708. We've circled all of that stuff. They're outside of that. So there were public inputs put into panel 13 saying, hey, you need to mandate selective coordination on A and B. And panel 13 would say, they're not under our purview. They're not part of the system. And then someone would say, well, you need to say that they don't need to selectively coordinate. And they'd say, well, that's outside of our purview. We don't have any purview over that. They have purview over the devices that are circled. And the way the code reads, device D has to selectively coordinate with everything upstream, which includes B and A. And C has to selectively coordinate with everything upstream, which includes B and A. But B and A do not have to selectively coordinate with each other, per the National Electrical Code. That could be a design decision by the design engineer. Go to the next slide, Jack.
I didn't put it in because we're running out of time.
Gotcha. That's fine. But that's sort of what's going on there. And, from what you've done, what Massachusetts has done by pushing to 0.1 seconds is basically the design engineer will probably meet the 0.1 seconds and ignore fault current in the design. I know that's how I will quote a job in Massachusetts. And that's how I quote jobs in other areas that are enforcing 0.1 seconds, especially in healthcare. But for the life safety system, that's a challenge because healthcare has all of these other redundant provisions to making a hospital. You've got big generators in there. You've got isolated power supplies. You've got all of these other things, which is a part of the argument on why they're giving some of that forgiveness. But in an Article 700, 701, and 708 system, that's a lot of cookies to be putting into 0.1 seconds.
Okay, so I've got to make a decision. I've got a lot of slides left, and we're going to get into the characteristics of the fuses, but it's going to take us another 10 minutes to do that, and to do it quickly. So we can continue on for 10 more minutes if everybody's willing to hang in there. I have no time limit myself. I don't know if Tom does, but we can quickly go through some of the characteristics and hold off the fuse holders for another time. So, Tom, are you up to sticking around for 10 more minutes?
Yeah, I can stick around. No problem.
All right. All right. So here we go. So here are our general purpose fuse offerings. We've got Class L. So I'm going to go through a list of all of these things, and we've got characteristics for all of them. So here is our Class CC fuses. Now remember those questions I asked earlier, all right? So here we are, 30 amperes or less for a Class CC fuse. The current limiting, optional time delay, we have a rating, an interrupting rating of 200,000 amps. Yeah. All sizes are 10 by 38 millimeters with a rejection feature, and UL listed for branch circuit protection. So here's your time. You got time delay, 600 volt, 600 volt, 600 volt, and these are 300 volts DC, 3 volts in, and then you get a 600 volt DC here, which is a fast acting fuse. So we have motor applications, transformer, then general purpose, where you might want a fast acting fuse. Tom, you can interject anytime you'd like. Yep. As we move forward.
Yeah, you'll see. And what I like about this slide is it shows you the general applications on the right. And then you'll notice that anytime you see a time delay, you're going to see things like motors and transformers and things like that. You can also use time delay on non-inrush type of loads. But I could argue that there's some inrush on lighting too, especially the new lighting that we've got these days. But in any case, you're fast acting. Again, you're going to want to consider what is the load that I'm on. You've got the Charlie Chaplins. These are the these are your midget class fuses. I like to call them. Yep, those are your midget class fuses, and they're just smaller. And again, the voltage rating and then the amp rating that they'll go up to is all critical and important parameters that you'll have to consider for the application that you're working on. You can probably go to the next slide. So your Charlie Chaplins, we call them Charlie Chaplins because of that little dimple on the top. Your CC fuses, your K5. So now you're getting into you've got these are not current limiting type of fuses. The interrupting rating is much less. You're up to 50,000 amps of an interrupting rating on a 600. Or up to 600 amps. There's no rejection features for these. Again, the rejection features come into play whenever you want to make sure you don't put one of these inside of a switch that is meant to have current limiting type of devices. And they come in 250, 600, 300 volt DC. Feeders, branch circuits. You'll see a lot of these on HVAC. They're low cost, non-current limiting type of devices. RK5s, now you're getting into current limiting type of solutions. There's rejection features. You'll see that on the tongue, on the whatever you want to call that. There's a little notch on that blade where it goes into the and the Class H or the previous class did not have that notch, so you wouldn't be able to put a non-current limiting device into a switch that a holder that is notched out so that it will accept that fuse. And that's what we call the rejection feature. Some things Some of these fuses will reject based upon a little notch like that. Others will reject based upon the size or other type of little nubs on the top. Like the smaller ones on the right, bottom right, there's like a little cup down there that's like a lip. That's the rejection feature on those. So you may have different styles based depending upon the holder. But again, these are time delay fuses. And look, you can see like this one here, an RK1, time delay fuse, motors, transformers. And then you have your fast acting. That's for your feeders and your lighting and your bus duct and things of that nature. So as you move up in the power distribution system, or depending upon what your loads are, you're going to pick a time delay or a fast acting. This goes up to 600 volts. They go up to a specific amps. You got your K5s, RK5s, RK1s. And if you plotted the curves for each of these, you would also see a difference. And you know, we say things like no time delay or fast acting. I'm describing the time current characteristic curve. So each one of these will have a different look of a time current characteristic curve. So all UL listed. Interrupting ratings on the K5 is 50,000. Then you're 200,000 on the RK5, right? So there's all of your different fuses right there, and there's your rejection features on the right down the bottom. You'll see that little nipple down there, a little nub that acts as a rejection feature, and that first general purpose gray fuse there doesn't have any of that. So that's a non-current limiting device. Some of them will have indicators to tell you they were opened. But you know, again, you really can look at the installation. If you see that gray fuse, you see something that doesn't have a rejection feature on it, you know you can get more current limiting. And what that means is lower incident energy, lower damage to the equipment that you're supplying power to, which is really, you know, if I can say I can limit the damage, I limit downtime, I limit the cost to repair, I limit the time to repair, the whole bit. So the faster acting just does a lot of great things all the way around. Next slide. So CF, that's your cube fuse. This was an innovative solution out of the Busman group that basically took that Class J fuse characteristic and put it into another form factor so that you can make a smaller panel board type of deal. But it's basically a Class J fuse. It's the rejection is by size and those little blades. They go up to 100, actually 200 amps, I think now, or 400 amps, 600 volt AC up to 400 amps, up to 300,000 amp interrupting. You know how we got 300,000 amp interrupting? We had to update the entire lab just to feed the fuse current, because these things are they're so efficient that it's just a matter of how much current that you can deliver to it. But we don't have any equipment that we can rate 300,000 amps. Finger safe solution, again, type 2, no damage protection. And then you got to think about where these go. The rejection clips. So what we're showing here from a NEMA perspective, we're sitting there saying, look, most of these switches will not ship with rejection clips. So they ship ready to handle a Class H fuse, which is non-current limiting. What you'd want to do is add those rejection clips and then put a more current limiting device inside this equipment, which offers, again, better protection for your equipment, better arc flash protection for your people, and lower or shorter downtimes and all that good stuff. Next slide.
This just shows the clip, so I'm just going to go on to the next one right there. Class J fuse.
All right, I'm a little bit of a delay from you. So Class J, so again, now you're moving up in amp rating. So we started at the Charlie Chaplins, the Class CC fuses that only goes up to 30 amps. Now we're moving up into 600 amps, current limiting 200,000 amp interrupting rated devices. These again are rejection by size. So that's what the feature. So remember, some of them had the notches, some of them will reject based upon the size. And again, you have your time delay, motors and transformers. Fast acting, it's in your panel boards, load centers, switchboards, things of that nature. And then you have your semiconductor fuses, which are for those soft starters and solid state relays. The semiconductor fuses are sized based upon how much energy they let through, not necessarily by a branch circuit rating of type of deal. They size those on how much energy they'll let back down to the load. Your class L's for large fuses. These are the big boys. These go up to 6,000 amps. So you remember 240-67, any fuse 1,200 amps and above may require an arc reduction technology, and it's because when you get to those larger fuses, that fuse curve is adding more and more delay. But you'll see these at the mains because these are the big boys, right? Pretty much. I mean, it goes down to 100 amps as well. But I would say if I was at 100 amp, I might be using a class J instead of a class L, depending upon what my goals and objectives were for the system. They've got time delay and fast acting panel boards. Motor. Look where your time delay is. Motors and transformers, inrush currents. So those are your big boys, and they bolt onto the bus basically for the most part. Your class T. T is for tiny. T for tiny. You get up to 1,200 amps, but they are much smaller than the class L, which is large. So your class T's are your smaller fuses. There's a lot of bang for your buck in here because they go up to 1,200 amps, but you can put a smaller enclosure. You'll see class T's in service entrance equipment type of solutions. In panel boards or metering centers. There you go, metering centers. That's your service entrance stuff. Very popular in the service entrance area. But your class T is for tiny, L is for large. Up to 1,200 amps though. They pack a punch. 2,000 amps of interrupting rating. Extremely current limiting. So you can imagine what that curve looks like. It's a steep slope. Where it crosses 0.01 seconds is not too far away from the long time region for the amp rating of that fuse. So it's a steep sloped fuse. Next slide.
All right. Next slide is in the fuse holder, which we are going to put a stop to this presentation.
All right.
And we are going to pick up fuse holders some other time. So I want to thank you, Tom, for joining us tonight. A lot of great information. And thank you for sharing that with the group. If there's any questions, I don't see any questions yet. I do have, make sure your name goes in the chat if you did not enter your name in there. So I have some sort of record. Maybe the state will give us all of the blessings for this. So Mr. Sargent joined us. See information note figure 732 added in the 2020 NEC, regarding coordination. All right.
Perfect.
Very good. So I think we got it. I don't see any questions up there. If I missed any questions in the chat and you are on the line, feel free to unmute yourself and we'll see if we can answer it or make it up. You know, I'm good at making it up.
Heck yeah, we'll make it up.
Hey, Tom, what's the category for a big girl fuse?
BG. BG. That's class BG.
We just call them valve fuses.
There's always one in the crowd. Always one in the crowd.
See you tomorrow.
All right.
Beautiful, Val. Awesome. How many other questions do we got? So we got.
Great job. Tom, how's Christy Rosati doing?
She's doing good. You know what? She left me a voicemail the other day. I got to call her back. I haven't talked to her in a little bit here. She's got some issues, got some things going on for work related stuff. So I got to give her a call back, but I think she's doing good. We got to get her engaged. Jack, you got to get her on one of these.
You're right. She's on my list of people to call. You're absolutely right.
Excellent.
We had, she gets our, John Powell was telling me she gets our constant contact notes, but I said to join during this tonight, she would have really enjoyed this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll get her on board. I'll give her a call and put it out there.
Great job though. We enjoyed it muchly.
I enjoyed doing this stuff. Jack's a good guy. He's going to do our program tomorrow, West Virginia chapter. If you guys want to tune in, we're covering. That'll be the last day of 1 and 2 family dwelling units.
So I gotta tune up on my West Virginia accent.
I was gonna say you need that, but
Yeah, yeah. We've
use the one, Jack. Use the one you had in Atlantic City.
That's right.
That's close to here.
Oh man, how often do you do these, Jack?
Turn up in the Western Virginia Code Book.
Oh, the West,
Yeah.
West Virginia Code Book. You know, we just got electricity a couple months ago.
That's right.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago.
How often do you do these, Jack?
We've been doing this for the last 10 weeks, every Wednesday night.
So how, can anybody join, or how do you advertise?
Anybody can join. I just have to make sure I forward it to it. We have a mailing. Most of the guys are forwarding my invitation. I send it out to a group of people. They send it out to a group of people, and that's how it gets around. But I've got the UL gang on board. They forward it around themselves.
Okay.
That's how we get it out there.
Okay, so I'm going to leave this up on my YouTube site and on Facebook. So do you want to, if anybody who watches this later says, hey, I want to join Jack, do they just send you an email, or can I put
Send
your
me an
email?
email? Yeah, absolutely. Send me an email. I'll make sure they're on the list.
What is it, Jack?
And,
Jack what?
we'll get-
Give me your email.
Jack.lyons@nema.org.
Lions@nema.org. I'm going to put that in the chat sessions on both of these, on Facebook and on YouTube, just so people know.
Rock on. That's good.
Yep.
I'm working with Donnie Cook. I don't know if we're gonna, and if I can strangle Mr. Sargent into helping us out. Donnie's got a nice service presentation. We're gonna try to do that. I'm trying to get a panel together, so don't go away too fast, because I'm trying to get a panel together to do odd questions of the code, and spend an hour throwing a bunch of question and answers out there on a panel. So
Well, that's great.
Yeah, so I haven't done that yet, but I really would like to get that kicked off, and we could probably spend 2 weeks in a row doing something like that. But I'm going to work with Donnie and do something like that he did down in Alabama for services. But that's where I'm at. So I'm struggling for next week. We'll see what I can come up with, but I haven't got anything yet. But I've got a few other NEMA presentations that I can work with, and if all else fails, we'll just throw it in Tim McClintock's lap.
Yeah, there you go. He owes you
All
one.
right.
You see this image of what class fuses are these red, yellow, and orange handled fuse types in that switch there? Take a look in your chat session. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the orange one's time delay. The other ones are fast acting.
Jeff Fecteau says no blow.
No.
you got fast acting, slow acting, and no acting.
Hey, Jack, is your slide deck publicly available, or is it a NEMA proprietary thing?
No, this is actually, you can have this one, because this is a NEMA one. I think that Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the fuse section put this out on their website there, or their for publication, or for public use.
Yeah, I think
I
that
just do search FU-1 on the NEMA site.
Yeah, if you can't get it, just email me and I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I got another meeting at 7:30, so I gotta head off. But this was great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you got to wait for our second presentation after NEMA FU1. We're gonna have a second one too. Look for that one.
FU2.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. So if I look at, there is a yep, you can download low voltage cartridge fuses NEMA FU1. It's out there on the website. $0 for electronic copy, but $112 if you want to buy a hard copy. I guess that's about the same price as a printer, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, the printer's cheaper. It's the ink that costs all the money.
That's true. That is so true. Jeez. Awesome.
Hey, Jack, you said that you're doing another one tomorrow night?
No, I'm helping Tom out down in West Virginia. We're doing a webinar from 10 to 12, and Tom actually promotes his on YouTube. Is that right, Tom?
Yeah. It's well. So this session is a West Virginia chapter IAEI. We sent books to the West Virginia members, and I've been promoting it. So it's a registration only. I am not putting that material on my YouTube site because it is the 1 and 2 family from the IAEI. It's copyrighted material. So the only way you get to see it is if you register, or if you tell me, I'll send you the link to it and I'll get you registered. And then we're giving CEU credits out as well.
Oh.
I do a sign in at the beginning. I do a sign out at the end. It's a 2-hour session, two CEU credits, or 2 hours worth of CEU credits.
You said from 10 to 12?
Yes, 10 to 12.
All right.
Yep. We open it up at 9:30. So let me know if you guys don't have my email address. It's Thomas A. Dmitrievich at eaton.com. I don't know. I'll put it in my I'll put it in the chat here. And then I have my YouTube channel, which I'm doing programs. So, I've been, for the last 3 months, I have been sheltering in place. And if you just go to youtube.com/c/Thomas Dmitrievich, if I can spell my name, that'll be my YouTube channel. So I've got a lot of stuff out there that you may find of interest. I don't know, but again, this West Virginia meeting is not going to be left up there. But I do use that as the platform to deliver it, and you get to see Jack one more time.
Woo-hoo.
We're gonna have to get you a better camera, Jack. Though, I mean, you're grainy, buddy.
I got terrible service.
Oh boy, this is going to be tough.
Wait till you see his pool.
I did. I've seen his pool. Yeah. He's taken videos of him in his pool, and he sends them to me. I told him, don't do that, Jack. Jeez.
Yeah, I'm telling you. Well, when it gets hot out, Brian sent me a picture. He was in Florida, and he was complaining that it was too damn hot for him. So I said, well, let me fix that for you. And I gave him this one.
Oh, this beautiful.
Yeah.
That's not bad. We can live with that.
I think so.
Yeah, but Jack, you get, hot up there about what, a week a year?
Today and tomorrow, I think, is the only hot days we're going to get.
Well, hold on. September's coming. Oh, good Lord.
Jeez. Do you have a copy of the 1 and 2 family dwelling unit in case I only get you audio and you can't see the slides?
Well, if we're doing teams, I'll be able to see the slides.
All right, I hope so, buddy.
But he did send me a copy of the next section. You're still in grounding and bonding, and he actually sent me the next section just in case we went a little further. But
perfect. I'm sure we'll get through grounding and bonding. We got 2 whole hours of listening to you chat, so that's good.
Woo.
Awesome. This is a good program, Jack. I like what you're doing. This is really good. Really good.
Yeah, it keeps us from going crazy,
Absolutely. Amen, brother.
Or crazier.
Yep, it's a short putt.
Yeah, that's right. All right.
Well.
Hey, Mr. McClintock, how did you make out? Oh, that's tomorrow. That's right. That's tomorrow.
Is Timmy boy on?
Timmy's on.
Yes, I am. Hello. Hello.
All right.
Well, hello, Mr. McClintock.
We had the conflict for Iowa tomorrow, electrical board meeting. So Jack agreed to step up to the plate, and I've got his translator, which is Tom Dmitrievich, so he'll be ready to roll.
I love it. Yeah.
So let me tell you, during your webinar today, I had I had the Maine State Electrical Board. They had their meeting, a virtual meeting, from 8 o'clock till 12:30. So I was listening to that, participating in that while you were having your 2-hour webinar together.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then in the middle of both of those, I got a phone call. So I was using my 2 hands and my feet to do all the work I needed to do. And in that 10 to 12 period, that it was pretty busy.
Well,
Yeah, I'll take the rest of the week off.
Good idea.
after tomorrow's program, though.
At noontime, at noontime, the wheels are up. I'm off to Jersey to see my daughter.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, you can't ask for better than that.
No,
Taking your own plane?
I am. Yeah.
Jeez, Jack. All right, brother.
Well, all right. We'll call it a night. Again, thanks for joining us. Tom, can't thank you enough for participating tonight.
Glad to be here.
And we will do it again soon.
Sounds like a plan, Stan.
All right.
Thank you, Jack.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks again, guys. Have a good night.
Hey, you
All right,
too.
Mark. You bet.
All righty.
Thanks, Jack.
All righty. All right, so that's the program. That was the Western Massachusetts, but they got a lot of different people. Jeff Sargent was online. Tim McClintock was online. So hopefully, I don't know, maybe you got something out of that. Maybe you didn't, but we streamed it. So thanks for joining me on YouTube and Facebook. And we will catch you tomorrow. If you haven't registered, please remember, send me an email. I think you probably have my email address, or send it through YouTube or Facebook. Send me a note. I'll get you registered, and you can attend our 1 and 2 family dwelling unit program, which is tomorrow from 10 to 12. It's the last one, and we just started grounding and bonding. So hopefully you can join us. And again, thanks for hanging in there. If you hung in there, I'm not sure how many people we had out there, but I'm going to be signing off for tonight. Good night.